An interesting thing to consider with hard bop is how artists' desire to have a lot of creative freedom really runs headlong into the limitations of popular song forms, because a lot of these jazz standards were hits of the day. And even though Miles Davis got a lot of flack for covering Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time and Michael Jackson's Human Nature late in his career, he was correct when he observed that originally jazz standards were just pop tunes like Time After Time. So, like pop songs today, pop songs back then were often repetitive. One of the most famous ones that became a jazz standard is the George Gershwin classic, I Got Rhythm. So here's the chords. It's a lot of that repeated over and over. So just to kind of fly you through the form once, I'm going to play one full set of the chords, just the bottom note here, and you can hear how repetitive it sounds. Hanging round my door. So that's just once. You can imagine if you are having to invent and get creative over that for 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes on end, you might not always enjoy the repetition of it. Certainly, there's lots of creativity that can happen within that scheme, and lots of people have done it. But I think hard bop was a time where people decided, you know what, on the B section, I wasn't really ready to snap back into. I had an interesting idea that I was exploring, and I would have liked to keep going. Or whatever. So, what started off as a minor pebble in the shoe became a blister and a big problem later. Even if we take another song that isn't outwardly so full of repetition, it just has a little bit of it, we can see there's a problem too. So here's the Jerome Kern classic, All the Things You Are, which is typically played slower, but I'm going to speed it up a little bit to save you some time here. Okay, so that's All the Things You Are. It does repeat this thing at the very end, although it wraps it up a little bit differently. So even that song, which is a very long form compared to, it still has a lot of sort of predetermined aspects of it. The whole song follows this idea of fifths, circles of fifths, 5/1s, and 2/5/1s. And if you don't know what that means, I've made some videos for non-musicians to help explain it, and I'll put a separate video up to sort of break that down. But the song doesn't have that many creative options because it is really following some rigid forms. That when you're on this note, it really always leads to that note, which always leads to this note, which always leads to this note, which always leads to this note. So after a while, in hard bop, and I think it's not unrelated to the fact that recording technology allowed artists to really spend a lot of time exploring the material and interacting with each other, some artists felt limited by this. And the question was, where can we go to allow us to stretch out where we don't have to circle back every 10 seconds or every 45 seconds or every minute or every 5 minutes even? What can we do that can be a little more guided by the soloist and never ending? One of the answers is modal jazz. Another one is free jazz. So I hope that's a musical example that helps make that conflict make a little more sense. It really had to do with the repetition that was inherent in popular song form then, and still today, actually. Thanks.